This morning's topic is ADS-B out, the regulatory mandate due to be enforced in the US on the 1st of January 2020 and Eurocontrol area later this year. With me to discuss the topic this morning, I'm very pleased to welcome Harry Lees. Welcome, Harry.
Morning.
Harry has 4 decades of experience in avionics, working across a wide variety of types, and Harry is our principal expert that helps determine best course of action for owners when negotiating regulatory changes and the pathway through that. I'm also very pleased to welcome from Honeywell, Mr. Stuart Toy. Welcome, Stuart. Stuart is a senior field support engineer for Honeywell and has occupied roles from the Royal Navy Fleet Air Arm, plus a number of Part 21 organisations, designing comm systems for VIP and VVIP aircraft. Most recently, before joining Honeywell, Stuart had a 12-year association in the EMEA region with Crane Aerospace. So welcome, Stuart.
Thank you.
So I think onto the topic of today, which is ADS-B out, an area that is perhaps causing a little bit of confusion. We hear a lot from the US about a number of aircraft that are still yet to be ADS-B out compliant, but remarkably little from the Eurozone at this particular moment. So let's start off with an easy question, gents. What is ADS-B out?
I'll jump in there. ADS-B out is basically a completely automated system. It uses, it's a very precise aircraft fix using GPS technology. What it does is actually transmits the aircraft's location, heading, altitude and other air data to some ground stations. That is then forwarded on to the air traffic control screens. Secondary to that, any aircraft that is equipped with ADS-B in would be able to also take on that information, certainly be able to update their weather, etc. on the route. Harry, anything else on that?
Just to summarise on there, we're using a precise GPS position to send that position data, and the position data is sent by an upgraded version of the Mode S transponder. So for most aircraft it will require an upgrade to a GPS receiver, upgrade to a transponder system. The crew have no control over ADS-B. As Stuart mentioned, it's automated transmission. So even if the aircraft isn't being interrogated by a ground radar station or by another aircraft with TCAS, it's still transmitting its own position out all the time.
Okay, and presumably this regulation has come about through air traffic control changes. Is that correct? Who's driving the regulatory change?
Yeah, it is. It's exactly that. It's part of an airspace mandate, both in the US and in Europe. In the US, it's part of a system called NextGen. And by using ADS-B, the aircraft position is much more accurate than by using primary and secondary radar. Ultimately, it will allow the ground station primary radars to be removed, which will cut down the infrastructure cost. And also, because the aircraft position is so much more accurate, you can more tightly pack the number of aircraft into the same amount of airspace.
Okay. And Stuart, my understanding is ADS-B out is not a new thing in the world. It's Australia has been using this for some time.
Yes, a lot of the other airspaces have been using it for a considerable amount of time. In fact, Europe and EASA are one of the last to take up the ball on this.
All right. Okay. So lessons have been learned elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Here to stay. So I'm an aircraft owner. Sounds all very technical. Sounds great. Sounds great for air traffic control. Great for safety. But why do I need to pay attention to it?
Well, if you fail to take attention of the mandate, then you're going to be restricted where you can operate your aircraft. The mandate is very specific. If we take Europe, for example, if you're flying in any controlled airspace and your aircraft is over 250 knots true airspeed cruise or over 5,700 kilos, you must be compliant.
Right.
If you're not compliant by June 2020, you can't fly in that airspace.
Okay, so that sounds like we're talking most business aircraft.
Majority is.
Yeah, everything from turboprops such as the King Air right through to all the large cabin class business jets and BBJs and the like.
So these dates are coming up pretty soon. I mean, we're not that far away from the 1st of January 2020, less than 2 years now. So what are the consequences of not taking action now?
Well, the main consequences will be being able to get provided slots to actually get the job done. The longer you leave it, there will probably be a cost impact, and also the longer you leave it, there may be an equipment impact. The earlier that we can get the orders in, the better idea we have of what equipment and what level of equipment we need.
Well, and I guess one of the things here would be we're obviously seeing a little bit of a delay in people planning these inputs in. So is this a cynic would perhaps suggest that this is just the MROs, the avionics OEMs, just sort of artificially creating a market? Is this the case, that these deadlines have slipped before?
Don't forget, in this case, the requirement isn't driven by aircraft or equipment manufacturers. This is driven by airspace mandates, by regulators, so by the FAA or by Eurocontrol. Whilst the equipment manufacturers are trying hard to come up with solutions, it's not them that are setting the mandate date.
So that is a very important distinction. This is an ATC requirement. This is not the OEM driving a market need. It is not an upsell on a capability. It is a specific ATC requirement.
Absolutely.
Do we think those deadlines are going to change? I mean, let's face it, in the Eurozone they've changed before. Is it 2009, Harry?
There have been several mandates that have moved. If we look at another mandate which is in place for the same compliance time in Europe, which is CPDLC, Control of Pilot Data and Communication. The mandate for that was published in 2009, compliance for the end of 2017. That mandate has moved to 2020, so it now matches the ADS-B mandate. The reason that one's moved is because the ground station infrastructure wasn't completed on time. The ADS-B mandate has also already been moved. Again, it was set for 2017 and it's been moved to 2020. Both the FAA and EASA have both said there will be no further extension.
Right. And
that's
what
as things stand.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's the drop dead date as we know it at this time.
So from a Honeywell point of view, I mean, this is interesting. You touched on it earlier, Stuart. What are the implications for you with people delaying these inputs? What does that mean from a part supply, a supply chain point of view for you? Where is the pressure going to come from?
Well, from our side, I mean, the longer people delay and do not put their orders in will ultimately impact. We won't have an idea of how many ship sets or what type of avionics equipment we will need and how much of that. So basically, we could get into a position, a bit similar like we did with the TCAS 7.1 scenario, where everybody left it too late, then there was no slots, there was not enough equipment to actually get it done on time. So it's very important that we get this information up front. We know exactly how much equipment we need.
Let's talk a little bit again about the consequences of this. So the consequences of it, for whatever reason, I've procrastinated, delayed, whatever the circumstances may be, the deadline expires, what happens?
You're restricted from the airspace you can fly in. So if you're in a corporate jet and you can only fly in Class G airspace below 18,000 feet, well, it's not viable to fly your aeroplane. Your range will be hugely restricted, your fuel consumption massive. It's totally the wrong environment to fly that aeroplane. So in effect, you're grounded. You're not legally grounded if you're outside controlled airspace, but you can't use the aeroplane in any useful manner.
Okay, and when we talk about effectively grounded, what does that mean in terms of I wake up, obviously this is a poor condition for my aircraft to be in, I don't want to be in that situation, I need to go and get the input made. What then are the consequences because I've delayed?
Trying to find an MRO that's got the capacity, ensuring there's a solution. Today there are not certified solutions on every platform. There are STCs in progress, but not every platform has a solution available today. Part 21 organisations in Europe are working on current STCs, so there will be options. But if people leave it that late, then yes, slot availability, solutions, equipment availability. So you could turn up on the 1st of January 2020, not compliant, and it could take several months before you can find a slot to get into.
So this is additional downtime onto the aircraft. It is really kind of going to have a consequential effect on your aircraft's operations. So in terms of downtime, what kind of man hours are we beginning to look at here for an installation?
If you take relatively simple aeroplane, Citation Mustang with Gama G1000. It's a very simple upgrade. I can put it in simple terms, one piece of wire from a transponder to a GPS, all in the cockpit, upgrade the transponder, which is a service bulletin from Garmin, plug it back in. The whole job would be done probably in a day and a half, so if it's done on a scheduled maintenance input, it would have no impact on operation at all, maybe 12 to 20 man-hours. If you take something like a Hawker 800 XP with Honeywell Primus avionics, there are several solutions, depending on whether you put in a dedicated GPS receiver or upgrade the existing systems, and that is a cost decision really. But if you need to strip the cabin interior out to put in a new GPS receiver, put a new antenna on, you could easily see 400 man-hours.
Right. And is that something you would concur with, Stuart?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the optimum time to do that type of modification would be during a maintenance input, and try and amalgamate those hours at the same time. Yeah.
So if it's not done in connection with a maintenance input, that's more
Then it's-
aircraft on the ground time, considerably more cost associated
Very much so,
with
very
it.
much so.
Right, okay. Yeah, those man hours don't sound like they come particularly cheap.
No, and I would think as you approach the deadline, costs are going to go up.
Yeah.
That's happened with previous mandates, equipment prices will rise. Some MROs will see an opportunity there of, there's a grounded aeroplane, he needs it tomorrow, I need to reschedule all my slots. There's going to be a cost penalty associated with that.
So what advice would you give to owners? I mean, bearing in mind that there are the possibilities of getting your aircraft effectively grounded. There's the possibility of builds increasing unnecessarily through procrastination or being uncertain about what pathway to go down. What would your advice be to them right here, right now?
Well, at the moment would be to try and get your slots and the orders in as soon as possible. Obviously, slot availability, that's going to be really key. There's only an X amount of maintenance facilities that will be able to do it. Again, from our side, we need to know what equipment and how much equipment we need to stock. So those are the key drivers of getting in. And then the cost, of course. I mean, obviously, if you leave it to the last minute, the costs are going to go through the roof, as Harry said. Basically, a last minute slot into any MRO or anything like maintenance facility is always going to be expensive.
Yep.
So it's really important to get that in and in early.
So maybe we can sort of extend this on, because ADS-B out isn't the only regulatory mandate coming through. I mean, Harry mentioned just a moment CPDLC. Are we looking similar timeframes by the sound of what Harry said? What are the consequences of putting these?
Well, there are a couple of other mandates. Yes, CPDLC is a European mandate, controlled pilot data link, as we mentioned earlier. That's been moved from 2017 to 2020. The work involved in that is best done at the same time. If you need to do a cabin strip for access, you're best doing that at the same time as you do ADS-B. There's really very little publicity happening about CPDLC. People aren't perhaps aware of it. But it's any aircraft in Europe flying over 18,000 feet in controlled airspace, again over 250 knots or over 5.7. Over flight level 285, it's the same as the RVSM mandate. But any of those aircraft will need to be CPDLC compliant by 2020.
So just because I've got ADS-B out, sounds like it doesn't mean that I'm actually compliant.
No,
it's not the whole story, no.
Right.
And then at the same time, aircraft that are flying on the North Atlantic, from December just gone, you have to be compliant with FANS 1A if you want to fly in MNPS airspace. So flight levels between 350 and 390. If you're not FANS 1A compliant now, you can't fly in those nominated tracks. We are aware of aircraft that have happened over the new year where they've been refused flight plan tracks that they wanted to use, had to reroute, take additional tech stops for fuel.
Right.
So immediately those aircraft are already incurring financial penalties and time penalties to their owners, passengers, by having to route alternate means.
Yes.
So FANS 1A CPDLC definitely needs to be addressed at the same time as doing ADS-B.
Right. And Stuart, from a equipment perspective, what are we talking here? Are we talking similar technologies that are involved? What is being put into the aircraft?
Yeah, basically technology-wise and LRU-wise, yeah, very much so. There's still a lot of modification work that needs to be required to install those systems. Again, it involves a lot of man hours. The more you can amalgamate the man hours, the better, more cost-effective it will be.
Yeah.
Certainly, we still, again, if we still don't know the numbers of LRUs and stuff that we need and require, then again, there's always the chance of not having enough.
Right, okay. So again, the message here is we need to get these orders in soon.
Absolutely.
To ensure that you've got the part supply to hand over to the MRO to be fitted, and that is going to be a smooth transition. If not, you're in a slightly chaotic, not really sure when things are going to happen, costs time, costs money. Okay. From a Honeywell point of view, obviously you offer part of your history, Stuart, has been in the design of communication systems.
Mm-hmm.
So is that an opportunity as well to look at some of the communication systems within the aircraft? Presumably if the interior is out, then there are some other aspects that could be fitted.
There's certainly upgrade paths. I mean, we do have a lot of service bulletins and sales bulletins for customers to look at and see the different routes they can take.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
In summary, then, it sounds as though action, it's not really a myth that action needs to be taken. Action does need to be taken. And your advice as our two experts on the panel this morning, what would it be? What do people need to do? What do owners need to be thinking about in terms of taking that action?
Well, owners definitely need to take it seriously. We've heard a lot of rumours around the industry that people aren't really getting too involved with it, trying to push it back. You need to be upfront. It's got to be done. Yeah, so you may as well get everything in line, get your slot, get all your equipment on order, and get all that done as soon as possible. Certainly try and match it in your maintenance inputs, and that will reduce the cost as well.
Plan it with a major inspection if at all possible. It'll reduce your downtime, it'll reduce some of the cost because major inspection tends to require the interior to be removed. And on a corporate jet, that is an exceedingly expensive part of maintenance activity. So if you can tie it in with a major inspection, 96 months, something like that, then that's ideal. But obviously we've only got 22 months left.
Yes.
So
yes.
many aircraft won't have a 96-month slot to fit in.
Right. Right.
So some people are going to have to bite the bullet and accept the fact that they're going to be paying more now because perhaps they've delayed it even though the mandate's been around for a few years. But ultimately, it's not going to go away. Engage with an MRO now, get a slot, or you'll miss the deadline.